Nolan Wells bombshell. A witness tells us tonight, I went with Nolan's mother to the coroner's office, and this is what I saw. Good evening. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. I want to thank you for being with us. Nolan is dead.
Could it be a decompositional change? Could it be something else like blunt force injury? It's hard to say at this point in time.
I find it very difficult to believe, Dr. Kendall Crowns, that not one, but two medical examiners cannot figure out why he had deep red subcutaneous markings.
No immediate signs of foul play. That was the official conclusion delivered to a grieving mother sitting in a sterile conference room at a coroner's office. 6 words, delivered by a soft-spoken professional who had examined the body of her 19-year-old son. And yet those 6 words would not hold. They could not hold. Not when the photographs showed something else entirely. Not when 2 separate medical examiners would later admit they could not explain what they were seeing. Think of it like this. You are handed a document that says the building is structurally sound, but you are standing in the lobby watching cracks spider up the walls. That is the gap we are dealing with here. The gap between what the official record says and what the evidence refuses to let go of. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Beyond the Gavel file, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. The morning of the discovery, the Tactical Operations Center sat at the Lake Mars boat launch. Fixed-wing aircraft had been deployed at 0635. Search teams were mobilizing across Horn Island and the surrounding waters. Then the call came in. A body had been found. No name, no details. Just a location and a notification.
That Nolan's body was found and that you ended up at the coroner's office. Start at the beginning.
So early that morning, I deployed some resources. I deployed an aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft that wheels up at 0635, as you can see right there from the photographs. I was on my way to the Lake Mars boat launch. That's where the Tactical Operations Center was set up. And I received a phone call. Received that phone call from the Sheriff's Department that a body had been found. Didn't say who it was. I was probably 15 minutes out from the location. I then received a phone call within minutes after the conversation from the sheriff's office from Nolan's mother, Christine, and she was frantic. That mother's intuition, she knew what was going on. So I'm meeting at the boat launch. I was there about 15 minutes ahead of time. Had conversations
Hold on just one moment.
Sheriff.
Hold on.
Yep.
For those of you just joining us,
Yep.
Josh Gill is with us. He is the United Cajun Navy incident commander in the search for Nolan Wells. You stated that you received a phone call from Nolan's mother, Christine. You said she was frantic. What was she saying?
So again, I'm going to paraphrase. She said that they had found him, that they had found a body. My biggest concern at that exact moment was to make sure that she was safe, that she had, a safe way to get there, because it was the beginning of what's more than likely to be the worst day of her life. Again, so continuing on.
Hold on. Josh, you got me drinking from the fire hydrant here. Every word you're saying sparks 100 questions. So
Sure.
Nolan Wells' mother calls you, okay? Where was she when she called?
She was en route to the boat launch as well. We were meeting there
Okay.
For the search.
Okay. Had she been told that a body had been found?
Yeah, when she called me, so we had earlier communication, but via text, when she called me, she told me that a body had been found. She had been notified by the Sheriff's Department.
Oh.
When Nolan Wells' mother arrived at the boat launch, she did not walk. She ran. Straight to the incident commander. Straight to the man who had been searching for her son. She was hyperventilating.
Got it. Okay. So you meet at the boat ramp. And when you first saw her, what was her demeanor?
So she came to me. She gets out of the vehicle, comes to me, gives me a big hug. Again, it's a mother who her intuition is that her body was just found. So obviously sad.
According to what we learned,
and
the moment she gets out of the vehicle, she runs straight to you and is hyperventilating.
absolutely, absolutely, she came straight to
What
me. I mean,
happened?
20 people. She gives me a big hug and starts crying. And look, I'm a softie. I started crying with her. We literally sat in the parking lot on the ground in the gravel for probably 15 minutes. And we had some pretty deep discussions. She cried. I cried with her, and her husband was there as well. And I want to say this, that he's a very stoic individual, and he stood there with his hand on both of our shoulders and was a part of everything. It was one of those moments you don't forget.
What was she saying? What was she saying? I mean, in a moment like that, how do you console a mother, Josh, that has been told by this disembodied voice on the phone, we found a body? I mean, what was she saying? Did she not want to believe it was Nolan? Did she believe it was Nolan? At this point, she had not ID'd a body yet. Nobody had identified that this was Nolan. Was she holding out hope? What was going on?
She knew. Again, mother's intuition is strong. It's very strong. In her heart, she knew. As far as what she was saying, why is always the question, you know? Um, she asked God, why? And the rest of the conversations were just, memories real quick. And I'm assuming everything was just flashing in front of her eyes because, again, it's the beginning of the hardest time of her life. Losing her son. I was there just to console her and to help anyone I possibly could.
What was the dad saying, if anything?
He was, again, he was really quiet. He was a quiet gentleman, but his physical presence afforded her, made her feel safe. And I will say that, he stood there with us, on the ground. He's there. And his presence said a lot, and it meant a lot to his wife, to Miss Christine. And again, that's a tough time for him as well.
They
So-
sat together on the gravel parking lot, not in chairs, not in a private room, on the ground.
No, ma'am. Like I said, when she first came to me, she gave me a big hug, and I wrapped my arms around her, and we sat down. We sat very quickly. We remained seating for quite some time to have that discussion, say
On
a
the
prayer. I
parking
did
lot?
pray with her right there. Yes, ma'am. On the ground in the gravel.
Y'all were sitting
Right.
on the. And you said she was hyperventilating. You sit on the ground. I believe I heard you say that you started praying.
Always. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Was she
And the
praying
prayer-
that it
so-
wasn't
and-
Nolan?
So, and again, I'm paraphrasing and going from the best of my memory. It was more of a prayer for peace and comfort is what I did. And I always ask for that and then for answers, and I prayed Godspeed if it is Nolan, and, for the Lord to put his protecting hands over us and everything that we do, and to be with this family and this mother, especially during these hard times. It's an emotional time.
I cannot even imagine. I'm trying to get my head around the picture of you and Miss Christine sitting on the ground in a parking lot with her crying after just been told we found a body, and she knows it's Nolan.
Well, sure.
I thank God that you were there. I thank God that you and Nolan's dad were there to help her. I don't know how she even stood up. How did you get her to stand up?
So it was about 15 minutes we were there on the ground, and a couple times the sheriff came up and he saw what was going on, and the sheriff's staff, and they understood that it was one of those moments where we need some space. She finally, and I hate to say she called her composure because it was an emotional time for me as well as the father, and we stood up and the sheriff came over and, he started discussing what the
help her
process
up?
would be. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
I don't know
Yes.
how she even stood up.
the
Okay,
grace
so
of
you help
God.
her up off the ground. Yeah. Okay, then what happens?
So a family and friends started to arrive, and the security let them in, and the sheriff came up, and the sheriff again, um, he had to help deliver that news, that a body was found and do his formal, and I hate to
And
say
she
no.
prayed, not for a miracle, not for a different outcome. She prayed for peace. She knew. The body was transported to the coroner's office. The family followed in a sheriff's
The family
escort.
gathered, and it was, I'd say, a matter of 15, 20 minutes maybe. We were then escorted. Christine asked me to accompany them to the coroner's office, which I was extremely honored to do so. And then the sheriff's department escorted us to that coroner's office.
Can I ask you something, Josh? When the sheriff came over, was it the sheriff or a deputy sheriff?
It was the sheriff.
The sheriff.
He was.
He comes over
Yes, ma'am.
and formally tells her what she was already told on the phone. A body has been found. Had the body already been taken to the coroner's office?
It was en route. So it was
They
en
were
route.
placed in a conference room that felt more like a business office than a medical
Get to
facility.
the coroner's office. What happens when you get to the coroner's office and Nolan's body is already there?
Correct. So we go to the coroner's office, we sit down. The coroner, he comes in, rather quickly, 10, 15 seconds once the table was filled with all the people, family members, friends, myself.
What table? Were you in a conference room?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. A conference
Oh
room
gosh,
table.
at the medical examiners or coroners, everything is so sterile. And everyone I've
So
ever been to.
So this was like an office conference room. You walked right in the door, and there it was. Didn't really have that feeling of a coroner's office, if that's fair to say. More like a business office conference room. Um, he walks in, very polite gentleman, very professional, well spoken, soft spoken as well, and basically said that they found a body, and from initial appearance, he identified him as Nolan. He did want to take a DNA swab or get a DNA sample from the family just for further confirmation and for, I guess, record keeping, whatever it was. But then he also, she asked about the condition, and he went into there were no immediate signs of foul play. Okay, to me, again, my opinion in hearing this is no signs of blunt force trauma, or any I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, any signs of foul play. What we would consider that.
Well, I guess they hadn't seen that big red mark on the back of his occipital yet, underneath the skin. And I take it at this juncture, Josh, his throat had not been dissected to look for potential subcutaneous bruising. So
Sure.
you're telling.
And there, the coroner delivered the news. Initial appearance suggested it was Nolan. Dental records would confirm it later.
Let me make sure I understand this. The coroner identified Nolan based on description. Because I've seen a photo, which we have not shown, of Nolan's body where it washed up. Well, I say washed up. That's really a term of art. I don't know that he washed up. I don't know how his body got right there, because it seems to me it was half in the sand and half in the water, right? So I don't know how it got there. That said, he made this ID based on the description given to him of Nolan, but wasn't the actual ID made from dental records?
So
And there were no immediate signs of foul play. No immediate signs. That phrase should have been a comfort. It should have been an ending. Instead, it became the first contradiction in a case defined by contradictions. Because here is where the evidence starts to fracture the official narrative. The body was found on wet sand, not floating in the water, not submerged offshore, on the beach.
Fingerprints. So I would really like to know more about the condition of the body. That's what I am assessing as a death investigator when I respond to a scene. So there should be a death investigation report from a death investigator who has experience looking at bodies and has experience examining these type of things to show exactly what his condition was when he was found. And if the body is decomposed more than what you would normally expect in a drowning case, that should be a big red flag. That's something that you definitely need to look into further.
So you're saying, let me follow up on what you just said. You find it odd that he was quasi on the shore. You also stated that location where the body is found is typically where they went under. You also said that the body must have been too decomposed to make a facial ID. I did not hear an explanation as to why fingerprint ID was impossible.
Fingerprint identification would be impossible if the hands were dried out to an extent where they can't be fingerprinted. Sometimes people that are underwater, or if the hands are underwater, the skin, just like if you're in the bathtub for a prolonged period of time, the skin ends up looking the same way. It just gets kind of wrinkled, and it's very hard to get a usable or workable fingerprint in those scenarios. So one scenario would be the body is too decomposed to get a fingerprint or a visual identification. And then the alternate scenario is the body or the hands were exposed to the water too long to where they just are not able to get a good workable print. So those are the different possibilities. But again, his position at the edge of the bank or partially in the water, that's really concerning because there's tons of people around that area. If he was in that position or on the shore decomposing for a day or so, why did nobody see him? Those would be my type of questions that I would ask if I were a death investigator responding to this scene.
Jeff, I'm looking right now at the photo of his body. And it's about, the beach is flat, and I would say it's about 3 to 4 feet from where there's nothing but sand, no water. It looks like it's at just as the water is starting, like you could walk in it very easily and your ankles may not even get wet. He's not out in the water at all. He's on the beach and on wet sand. That's the way to put it. It's wet sand. He's not out in the water, Jeff Gentry. What does that mean, if anything?
That's really abnormal. I would have a ton of questions in that case. I would wonder if there's no waves, no strong current, why is that body up on a shore? How did it get there? And just like when we're looking at blood evidence or other forms of evidence, if something is in a certain position within a scene, you have to question how it got there. I have investigated a lot of deaths, bodies in canals, rivers, lakes, large bodies of water, never really near the ocean to where you would expect somebody to wash up to shore. But in these cases, even though there's strong current, waves, large bodies of water, I've never really seen bodies up on a shore, especially up out of the water enough to where they could decompose significantly to where they can't be identified or can't be fingerprinted. So that would be a very big question that I would have in this case is, with the absence of waves, with the absence of a strong current, how in the world did this 19-year-old man end up on shore out of the water?
Josh.
A forensic death investigator reviewing the photographs noted something deeply unusual. In drowning cases, bodies typically remain near the location where the person went under. They do not migrate to shore without strong currents or significant wave action. And Horn Island on that day did not present those
Out of the water.
conditions.
Josh, I'm going to pick back up with you and Nolan's family at the coroner's office, but you disagree with Jeff's characteristic. Explain.
Wind, wave, tides, currents. If you look, there's also there's some pictures, some aerial pictures that show driftwood way on the beach. Those four things are what impacted, as I appreciate, where Nolan ultimately ended up. If you look in one of those pictures, man, a wave is about to come right over and crest right near where the body's at. So that shows that there is some wave actions and some currents. The winds, the waves, the tides, the currents have a huge impact on, anything that's put into that water. It's known as the washing machine. It's a high tide, high current area. So that was the first things that I looked at whenever I saw that picture, and that is the one of those pictures that I showed to the sheriff immediately as I received it. The stuff that's dark in that picture right there, I believe that that's debris, and that debris could have easily or was washed up on that island. And if you look at the picture as well into the water, the white is that's wave action, either from wind, tides, or currents. So, and it's going towards the beach. You know, when you walk down the beach and you find shells and you find, the bottle with the message in it, it gets washed up on the beach.
Okay, so I think in simple terms, you're saying you believe the body was washed up from the water to that location. Okay, and Gentry is saying typically a body is found where it goes in the water. So you're right. Tidal experts, water experts will have to determine that. I want to get back to you at the coroner's office. A dental exam was used to make the ID, which leads me to another question. If his face and his fingertips were so decomposed that they can't make an ID, then how do they know there was not bruising or there was not skin marks on his face, on his hands? That's a whole nother thing. You're not a medical examiner. I get it. But that's a question that needs to be answered back to you. The family, Miss Christine, the dad, were asked to provide DNA. Okay. You did not see the DNA taken, probably a buccal swab. What happened then?
But there was something else. Something visible in the photographs. A deep red subcutaneous marking at the back of the head, under the skin, not pooling from decomposition, not bruising from being moved, a mark that 2 medical examiners could not explain.
So, correct. I'm not a medical examiner nor a coroner. I have gathered information and heard multiple people speak on that, especially about the red spot, right? We'll quote unquote call it the red spot. And as I appreciate that may be pooling or whatever, it could possibly be cellular decomposition. Again, I'm not a medical examiner or a coroner, but I do know what the coroner said at that first meeting with him.
Unexplained marking. That is the phrase that should stay with you. The coroner's initial assessment relied on a visual examination. No dissection of the throat had yet been performed. No deep tissue analysis had been conducted. The body was too decomposed for visual identification, too decomposed for fingerprint analysis.
Forensic certified bloodstain pattern analyst, crime scene analyst, death investigator, author of forensic science. Jeff, why did they have to use dental records to identify Nolan Wells' body?
Nancy, usually dental records are used when other forms of identification cannot be utilized. So the first thing that we always try to do is to visually identify somebody. And if you have family there or friends or an ID, something to reference to visually identify the person, then that is the first step. So just getting a general idea of who they are. Then you want to move to a scientific form of identification. And that is something based on a scientific discipline. So there is proof that it is the person when it goes to court or additional questions are asked later. Your first form of scientific identification is fingerprints. That's always going to be the easiest and fastest. And if he had an ID or driver's license, then there should be a fingerprint on file to be able to identify this person rather quickly. However, in this case, if he had been deceased for a day or two before he was found, then forms of scientific identification like fingerprints or even like a visual identification may not necessarily be available. So in those scenarios, then you move to alternate forms of identification like dental records. So that you would have to get the person's dental records from when they were alive to compare them against dental records taken when they're deceased at the autopsy. The last form of identification that's used, which is the most expensive and most time consuming, would be DNA. However, if you're going to take this case to court and it's going to be tried like a homicide, then you would probably want to use a form of identification like DNA because it's much more solid. You can verify with percentages how likely it is that the person is who you believe they are. So that's why dental records were most likely used in this case versus something simple and fast like fingerprints or visual identification.
Jeff Gentry can be found at evidenceoverassumption.com. Jeff, my takeaway from what you just said is they could not make a visual identification and they could not use fingerprints. You said those were the first two choices, then dental, then DNA. Why would they not be able to make a visual ID?
I'm assuming because he was outside and in the elements for a day or so. It's hot, it's July, it's very warm weather. However, in most cases where I have seen drownings where the person is underwater for a period of time, their body is pretty well preserved, unless we're talking about like multiple days, weeks that this person is underwater. Usually the water is cooler temperature, and if that person is face down in the water or completely submerged, their body is pretty well preserved until they surface. Usually a body after a couple of days surfaces. So I'm really surprised that he was on the shore. I've never personally investigated a drowning case where a person just ends up on the shore, especially if there's not a strong current or waves. Usually in bodies of water, the person will stay in pretty much the location where they go underwater if it's witnessed. They don't usually move around much after they have submerged or gone underwater. So to me, it's very concerning that he was on the shore, or that his body surfaced that quickly. But that's what I am guessing is why they couldn't do an immediate visual identification with the family or even fingerprints.
And
So
yet
I
the
would,
conclusion of no immediate signs of foul play was delivered before any of that deeper work began. Let that sit for a moment. The same condition that prevented them from identifying his face or his fingertips did not prevent them from concluding there was no trauma. How does that work? How can a body be too decomposed to read, but clear enough to clear? The unexplained marking, a secondary forensic pathologist was requested by the family. That is standard procedure for grieving parents who do not trust what they are being told. And what did that pathologist find? The same problem, the same inability to explain the deep red subcutaneous markings. Not one medical examiner, two.
Josh, did you speak with Nolan's mother again after that day?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We've had numerous conversations.
Regarding?
And so we had conversation about a forensic pathologist, a secondary forensic pathologist. She wanted one. I gave her a recommendation that I got from somebody. She also discussed an attorney. She sent those messages as well. But the majority of our conversations, man, to be honest with you, were I'd send something to her, keep your chin up and your chest out and just know that you've got a lot of people that love and support you. I wanted to give her words of encouragement because I know how important that is to a family, but also let her know that if there's any questions that she has, that I could possibly take some of that weight off of her shoulders or off of her family's shoulders to help assist, that I'll do it for her. And we're here for her.
Did she have questions?
It's not really, because she got an attorney rather quickly, um, which is fine, whatever, that's on them. Again, the conversation turned into, very cordial. Thank you. Thanks for the
The
prayers.
family sat in that conference room and listened to a calm, professional voice tell them their son showed no signs of trauma. Then the photographs came back. Then the autopsy reports came back. And suddenly the calm professional voice was replaced by silence, by questions, by the slow, grinding realization that the official story was incomplete, the unexplained marking. Here is the ticking clock moment. If two certified medical examiners cannot explain a visible physical anomaly on a 19-year-old's body, what else
Nolan's
did they
home.
miss?
After leaving the coroner's office with the family, was there any concern that there had been foul play?
It really didn't come up it just didn't come up. I think that whole grieving process, and it hit her hard when they got back to the house. At what point did potential foul play or the thoughts of foul play or the accusations come into mind? I don't know.
I think
What else was too inconvenient to note? What else sits in a case file somewhere in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, waiting for someone to ask the right question?
if you know or think you know anything about the death of this young man, Nolan Wells, dial 228-769-3063. There's a $125,000 reward for information regarding what
Now,
happened.
the United Cajun Navy incident commander who accompanied the family that day has gone on record. He has stated that the coroner was professional, compassionate, and soft-spoken. He has also stated that the coroner's initial conclusion does not align with what the family later learned from the photographs and the secondary examination. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a documentary gap, a gap between what was said in that conference room and what the physical evidence demonstrates. A gap between no immediate signs of foul play and two examiners cannot explain the deep red markings. Those two statements cannot both be true without serious qualification. And qualification is exactly what the family has never received.
I personally believe at that point she accepted that it was him.
Why do you say that? You must have observed something that makes you say that.
Again, it just actions, and not denial, not beating on the table. It's not him. Let's go. Let's keep looking. And her being in the medical profession as well as I believe a nurse practitioner. I think I will never say the word accept. She understood that what was being told to her. Right. Yeah. I'm not a parent.
Still crying?
I don't have any. Absolutely. She still cries to this day. And look, so I want to make this very clear to everybody that I support Christine in what she's doing. There's not a playbook that's written for a grieving mother who doesn't know what happened to her son. And I truly hope and pray every day, as well as my organization does, that she finds peace and comfort and she's able to accept
and you know what else, Josh?
Whatever the results are.
I don't know
Yes.
how this would have unfolded if it had not been for the United Cajun Navy. I'm just putting that out there. For some reason, y'all have been gotten so much hate, but you guys were out there at the get-go. You're the one that went with Miss Christine to the coroner's office. You were there. You're the one that helped her stand up off the ground.
Nolan Wells was 19 years old. He went to Horn Island on July 4th with friends. He never came home. His body was found on the edge of the water, and the official explanation remains incomplete. Not because it is necessarily wrong, but because it has never fully accounted for what the evidence shows.
Tidal experts, water experts will have to determine that. I want to get back to you at the coroner's office. A dental exam was used to make the ID, which leads me to another question. If his face and his fingertips were so decomposed that they can't make an ID, then how do they know there was not bruising or there was not skin marks on his face, on his hands? That's a whole nother thing. You're not a medical examiner. I get it. But that's a question that needs to be answered back to you. The family, Miss Christine, the dad, were asked to provide DNA. Okay. You did not see the DNA taken, probably a buccal swab. What happened then?
So if I may add one thing, is I think that'd be a great question to ask the coroner is, how did he identify? Because he was pretty sure, in his best professional opinion, that was Nolan. And maybe he wanted the dental records just out of professionalism. And hey, isn't that one of the most definite ways to identify? Sure, and out of courtesy to the family. Let's do it the easy way for you as well as to get the dental records.
So here is your call to research. The publicly available documents in this case include the initial coroner's report and the secondary forensic pathology review. Pull them. Compare the language. Look specifically at the section describing the occipital region and the subcutaneous tissue. Then ask yourself one question in the comments below. Does the official conclusion of no foul play match the physical description of the body? If this video helped you see the gap between the official narrative and the actual evidence, like and share it. Subscribe to Beyond the Gavel file and turn on notifications so you never miss a documentary breakdown. We follow the documents. We follow the testimony. And we never stop asking the questions the official record refuses to answer.